Welcome to the moment that changed everything, where we interview notable creative people to gain insights into how they got started and learn more about the moments that shaped them and their careers. Today's guest is Chris Hirsch, Vice President, Executive Creative Director, and partner at LG2 in Toronto.
That presentation skill set is huge. And you're right, it can take some great presentation skills can take a mediocre idea and make it seem incredible. I will say though, some of the best creatives I've ever worked with who continue to be some of the best creatives, like kill it in a room.
Chris has won everywhere, at Cannes, the Clios, London International, you name it. And if you've met Chris, then you know he's one of the most likable and talented guys in the industry. In this episode, we cover his upbringing in the small Nova Scotian town of Wolfville, how SNL inspired him to be a writer, and a hilarious story about a momentary blinded client. So welcome to the first NAC podcast, the moment that changed everything. And so we're so glad that you're here with us. And I wanted to tell you why we...
I hope this is the moment that changes everything
for
the podcast.
This might. First of all, we wanted to choose someone who is a close friend of NAC, and you've done everything from, you've been a judge a number of times, you co-chaired a couple years ago.
Yeah, Mr. Benici.
With Mr. Benici, which was great.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty sure you've been an entrant too.
Yes.
Yeah.
Who hasn't, really?
So, I thought, plus I knew you'd say yes. That was a big part of why I asked you on.
You're hard to say no to.
But, we have a lot of listeners who are young and getting into the business, and a big reason why we wanted to bring you on was because, you've gone through your career and had, reached a certain level, and I think people want to know what that's like.
Right.
So, I thought we'd start with, where did you grow up?
I grew up in a small town in Wolfville, Nova Scotia, on the east coast of Canada. The second thing I say to people when they don't know where that is I say, have you heard of Acadia University? And that's the town that is Wolfville. So usually people have heard of Acadia before they've heard of Wolfville. But I grew up there. It's about an hour from Halifax, down in the Annapolis Valley. It's one of those places where living in Toronto, it's like, well, what school's your kid going to? And I was like, schools, plural. I was like, doesn't everyone just
There's one.
Yeah. So it was one of those towns where you just go to the one school. It's Wolfville School.
I think everybody thinks of people who are from out east as being really friendly and affable, and I feel like that's you.
Yeah, there's you don't know it when you're there because you're kind of surrounded by those types of people. A lot of good storytellers. There seems to be a pride, I think, with people who are possibly from a smaller region. The same way like Canada on the international stage feels a little bit, reserved, but there's like a pride. I noticed that pretty early on. There's people are pretty proud to say they're from Nova Scotia because I think when there's a small group of you kind of band together and rah, rah, rah a little bit, as opposed to like a giant city with 6-7 million people.
People talk about the weather out there. Is it really difficult?
I hear this a lot from people who've never been there. It's not. I mean, everyone in Nova Scotia after a bad winter will get mad at this, but I'll say it's not that bad. Really? I kind of enjoyed it. Like I'm sure global warming has definitely affected things. Like when I was a kid, we had snowbanks up to the the power lines. Newfoundland is where you get some crazy stuff in the winter. But yeah, we've had our fair share. Sometimes we're in that hurricane path. So like. Back when you'd watch like the weather on like CNN and it's like Hurricane, Harry or whatever, Andrew, and it's kind of heading up the coast and they show that map. And then they're like, it looks like it's headed off to sea. So we've, Washington's been saved. And you just see the southern tip of Nova Scotia in the map. And I'm like, it's heading right for us, actually.
Those people don't matter.
Let's go back to the local news now. And I'm like, no. Occasionally the hurricanes will whip up there. And I think it was like 15 or 20 years ago, one just whipped right through Halifax, and it took a bit of a beating. But other than that, it's a little drizzly and cold. I mean, it's the ocean, so stuff just whips up. You can. It's true that the weather does change if you just sort of hang out for a bit.
Wait for 5 minutes and it'll change.
But I feel like that's the same here. Like yesterday, it was 30 degrees and sunny, and then what I thought was a twister rolled through. And then it was sunny again 10 minutes later. But I feel like that's only in the last 5 years when the world has gotten really, really bad.
I lived in New York for two years, and they would say the same thing.
Yeah.
Just wait 5 minutes.
Yeah.
And
It's
maybe
an
that's
East
true of
Coast- it's a
every
coastal
place.
thing.
Yeah, maybe it
Yeah.
is.
Were you ever there when there was flooding?
I was there for some pretty torrential downpours,
Okay.
and where it just seemed like positively tropical.
Yeah.
You know, and you know, it was always that time where there was a switch over and shift with the cabs. You couldn't find a cab, so you just took it.
Oh yeah, I
You
remember
stood there
that.
and took it.
I remember one of the first times I was there. I hailed one, and he's like, "Where are you going?" I'm like, "You're not allowed to ask me." Where
Yeah.
I'm going." Is that a thing? And he just sped off.
Wow.
It's like, "Oh, I have my New York moment."
Yeah.
Yeah, I just got whipped by a cab driver.
You see a sea of yellow going up
yeah,
one of the avenues.
and they're like, if you're not going the way
Yeah.
they're going.
Yeah, all the lights might be off too. They're like, no,
Yeah.
you know, quitting time. See ya.
Yeah.
It's the worst.
Yeah, it was changeover. That's pretty great.
What'd your parents do?
Education, teacher and a principal. So my mom was a teacher. My dad was with the school board forever, and then spent the last 5-6 years of his life as a principal. Thankfully, not at my school, but the town I was in, kind of everyone was sort of involved in the school at some point or another. So I had a friend's parent at some point throughout my whole life. So you couldn't get away with too much, but I guess the good part was they were keeping an eye out for you as well. So, yeah, if you're not, the Valley is very education focused, a couple of hospitals, things like that, but a lot of people involved with the school board. And my group of friends and their parents were all like teachers and principals. It just seemed like the norm to me. I thought that's what everyone did.
Does that mean you have to be a good student?
I thought everyone got the summer off too. That was a big disappointment. I was like, what do you mean? Yeah. Yeah, a little bit. Some kids had it harder than I did, I think. But yeah, homework was a big deal. Yeah, get your homework done, get some good grades.
Don't embarrass me.
Yeah. My dad has a great line that he says jokingly, which is, and he says it slowly every time. He says, don't do anything to embarrass yourself or your family.
Solid.
It's whether you're heading out for the night or, or heading to school.
You're reaching for a condiment, and that might come up.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, education was a big part of the house and everybody's house. It was, thankfully, so we all focused on our work. There was I think I was convinced that universities cared about like your grade 6 French test. So there was a little bit of fear instilled that maybe was false. Yeah, by the time you get to high school, it's just sort of, you're either interested in doing well in school or you're just like, yeah, I'm done.
So do you speak French?
No.
Yeah. Well,
Nova Scotia's English.
Well, but I saw that you went to Bishop's University.
Yeah.
And so, in my mind, I was like, yeah, maybe Chris does speak a little French.
No, that's a great question. My mom's actually from Montreal, so I'm a Habs fan. I'm sorry to anybody who isn't, but I grew up going to Habs games because that's where my grandparents lived in Montreal. But I try to speak a little bit of French here and there, but the way to best describe it is if I was lost, I could get
You could get by.
I could get by. But only in emergency situations. But I did go to Bishop's, great school, about 2 hours south of Montreal, right on the Vermont border there. Small, liberal arts school, super fun, met a lot of really good people there. But there's basically 3 English-speaking schools in Quebec, and it's like McGill, which is arguably bilingual, but McGill, Bishop's, and Concordia is where there was primarily English. The rest is very French.
So tell us about so at Bishop's, did you take marketing or advertising?
I minored in business, is how I like to put it. Yeah. I did start out in the business program at Bishop's, great business program. And I enjoyed most of the classes. I just wasn't down with like stats and accounting. Like basically 90% of business. Yeah. Yeah, just arithmetic. I really liked the marketing classes though. Consumer behavior, things like that, but wasn't really down with the microeconomics, macroeconomics, and some people were. Is that the rain?
That's the rain.
Oh my gosh. So I actually switched, and believe it or not, I actually took a bit of a liking to philosophy. Just really enjoyed the profs, the teachers, and just the dialogue, which is actually very much like 20, 25, 30 years later, what we do now. We just think for a living. Right. So I was thinking for school. It's like, and you could talk about, I wonder what if maybe he meant this, and which was interestingly enough, little did I know it was sort of a precursor to what you do every day. So I really enjoyed the philosophy program. It wasn't easy. I know a lot of people probably knock on philosophy a bit, but yeah, if you take elementary, intermediate, and advanced logic, basically your exam sheet looks like the Goodwill Hunting chalkboard. I remember one day finishing it, and it's like Will Ferrell in Old School, and he blacks out during the debate. They're like, "How did you do that?" He's like, "I don't remember a thing." That was like my last logic exam I remember. But you needed that to get your philosophy degrees. But I minored in business and took a lot of marketing classes and things like that.
So were you studying the Stoics and stuff like that for philosophy?
Yeah, even just saying that just made me get nervous.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, you study all of it, really. Yeah. Your professors are so much smarter than you, though. But so the amount of times I knocked on their door, like, could you explain what Aristotle meant by this? And they just look at you like...
And they would look at their watch and...
Yeah. And be like, that's
sure.
a 2-day conversation.
Yeah,
So, but yeah, we did all of it. Yeah. Some people... Then you start leaning towards the ones you liked more. I like the ones I could understand the best. Those are my favorite philosophers. They were the ones.
One of my favorite questions to ask people is, when you listen to their education and where they're headed, you can kind of see in the weeds where they might go. So I don't know if is there a direct connection to advertising in that?
Maybe. In terms of my experience?
Yeah.
I was just happy to be doing a program that I enjoyed. I was happy to be getting from year 1 to year 2. A lot of people bite the dust after the first year. Just can't handle the fun. But the moment for me was I think in third year you start thinking like, oh crap, what am I going to do, for a living? And everyone was like, well, I'm going to law school. Like everyone was like, I've got to figure it out. I remember thinking like, I don't want to wear a suit every day. I remember that actually being a thing. I don't want to wear a suit and tie every day. But I started doing a little bit of research. In those career books, those things are a disaster.
I don't even know what a career book
is. What color's your parachute and stuff like that. You ever heard of these?
Okay, all right.
They're in every guidance counselor's office. And I had no offense to bishops, but I didn't have a ton of help in the guidance counselor's office in my 4th year when I was like, what do I do? So I just started doing some research into things. And it sounds really cliche, but it was like, what would you feel guilty getting paid for? And I was like, laughing. So I remember being like, laughing's fun. I'd feel guilty. Like I got to start somewhere. And I remember I started thinking like I think probably writers, SNL skits were like, the top, you just were like, who are these hilarious people? But then I learned that they actually were the writers too. A lot of them were the writers, but then there were writers in the background. I'm 20, 19. I'm just learning a little bit. So I actually started reading a lot of books on, that type of world. Actually, I remember reading a book about like the history of SCTV. Are you familiar with SCTV?
No. I mean, I loved SCTV growing up and watching it.
And Dave Thomas? Yes. Yeah. Absolutely. So one of the books I read, this was when I'm in university. Sorry, I'm rambling I'm getting really close, dive into this, but
that's right.
I read that he was a copywriter he needed some money while he was trying to become a pretty famous actor. And before I think he met the crew for SCTV and started playing around there for a bit. And I think he worked at a couple agencies in Toronto, actually. And he talked about, this is like 2 pages of the book about the history of SCTV. And he talked about a few radio ads he had to write, I think for a car. And he was always trying to make it funny. And of course.
Of course.
Yeah, and I think that, I was like, oh, so you don't have to be, you can still write and make people laugh and make yourself laugh. But maybe not have to be 1 in a million people or trillion and go the route of like a sitcom or SNL or something like that, because that just wasn't going to happen. So as a result of that page, I started going, okay, what's this writing for advertising thing? Actually, believe it or not. Yeah. And then that led me to some, actually, funny enough, I actually started reading, I remember the librarian going, have you heard of Marketing Magazine? Shout out to Marketing. Rest in peace. But they had, remember when Marketing, so you remember the big tabloid version of it?
I do.
Color?
Yeah.
So they got that every month. And I actually would go into the library near the end of my 4th year and just read that stuff. This makes me sound so old, I just realized. But yes, you could Google it at this point. But I remember reading about some campaigns and things like that, and it was like art director blank, 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 or copywriter blank, blank, blank. So then I learned a little bit about the creative team dynamic and what they were called. So I was like, what is this copywriter thing?
What is this?
Yeah.
Sorcery.
Yeah. And then after graduation, I remember driving back to Nova Scotia, and we stopped at I guess in the U.S. it was a Barnes & Noble. I think it was in Maine or something like that. We took our time heading back. And I went and got this book, the Hey Whipple book.
Oh, great book.
Yeah. And I just, because I'd done so much digging that there were 2 books that came up that people said you should read if you want to be a copywriter. And I was in that section of the library, and I just remember seeing, I forget the subhead to Hey Whipple, but it was just like, basically it was like, so you want to be a copywriter.
I'm pretty sure it's Hey Whipple, squeeze this.
Yes.
This is about the Charmin.
Based on the Charmin character.
That's right.
Yeah. And then I think in the intro or something, it's like, so you want to be a copywriter. And I read that book the rest of the way home.
You know, like it sounds like you're pretty self-driven there, but a lot of people need some kind of validation along the way where they got to go, hey, have you ever thought about this? Because you seem pretty good at it.
Yeah, no, it did not have that.
You just had a dogged approach.
Yeah, I remember being excited that it was this new world that no one I knew was exploring. So there wasn't the pressure to compete with, probably like a friend or a classmate. Like, what'd you get on your LSAT? You know what I mean? Like, right. I like that it was this niche kind of world that no one really knew a ton about. But at least in my experience, you had to dig on your own. It was very like dig. Luckily, I was able to get the number of a guy who ran an agency in Halifax. I think I was like, hi, I'd like to work in your creative department. And he's like, great. Can you send a portfolio? And I was like, what's that?
What's a portfolio?
Yeah. Oh. And he actually took his time to give me a call and encouraged me to go to, at the time, Humber was the only copywriting program, I think in Canada.
And then you traveled here?
So then I applied to the Humber 1 year sort of postgraduate copywriting program after spending a year having some fun in Halifax. Yeah.
Because I was going to say, I mean, it's not like if you're a Toronto guy, there's a bunch of agencies that you can kind of explore and talk to people. But out in Halifax,
not many. Yeah,
not many.
No offense to the ones that are there, but yeah, I think there were 3 at the time. I won't mention them because I'll probably forget one and get in trouble. But there was a gentleman who I called. I think he was like the president of the agency or something like that. But he was nice enough to call me back, or I think he got like one of his creative directors to call me back because I sent like this email that was maybe mildly comedic. And they're like, that's pretty funny. Okay, we'll call you back. So thanks to them, they sent me to Humber. So then I contacted the Humber program, and I was just in time to apply for the following semester, and then just packed it up and came to Toronto, and then never left.
Yeah, I mean, your story is not dissimilar to mine. I went to Centennial College.
Yeah.
But
you grew up in Toronto.
I grew up in Ajax.
Okay.
But I went to school in Scarborough and took the course for Centennial. And what was attractive about it was it had a pretty extensive work placement.
Oh, nice.
So you got to work in an agency, and I was like York Mills and Don Mills. I think it was called Impact Advertising.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
that's an overpromise right out of the gate. So
listen,
it better be good.
You know, talk about starting at the bottom. They had like a forklift client.
Nice.
So I learned all about
Try writing headlines for forklifts.
Yeah, 13-foot mast, 30-foot mast, pneumatic tires.
Well, that's the thing is you learn a lot about a lot of interesting things.
Well, and I think for copywriters in general, I think, from the outside, that's one of the things about this job is that I like to say a little bit about a lot of things.
Yeah.
But you don't drill too deep.
No.
Right?
No.
Because you're constantly moving on to the next thing.
Well, that's the best part is most people have major attention deficit issues. I find in the creative field, like people are just like, what else can we do? It's just like a cat, it's just like, I want to go play with that now. So especially in Toronto where you do have to work on more than one client. I know in the bigger markets, you're going to do Crest for the next 3 years.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like I've heard there's like a Crest floor. Right. Yeah, a friend of mine worked at an agency in New York. She's like, this is the Crest floor. And I was like, oh my God, that's all they do? They're like, yeah.
Yeah, so, what's the turnover in that business? Did you hear about Gary?
Yeah, he went to Colgate.
He's done.
Yeah, he went to Colgate. They poached him. But I remember like one day being like, okay, today I learned about the intricacies of a lovely whiskey and the difference between like the different plies of toilet paper. You know what I mean? And I was like, and then like a car. Like, what's the latest engine of this car kind of thing. So yeah, you know a little bit about a lot of things.
About a lot of things.
Which is actually kind of interesting.
It's enough to get you through like a dinner party where you can pick up on anything and just kind of talk a little. Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Chris, very learned.
Oh, you got the new Kia Sorento. I hear that the 4-wheel drive is great.
Yeah, that's right. So tell us, like, what's the first break? What happened?
Yeah. So, so at Humber or Centennial, wherever you went, obviously you're just working on your portfolio for the year. And we actually had a little competition at the office recently about whose student portfolio was the most embarrassing.
I love that idea.
Yeah. It's embarrassing if you ever can go back. But a lot of us who were having the competition are from the era where there was no online portfolio. So we all still found these. And to be honest, I was pretty impressed with most of ours.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, I mean, that's a
and I was going up against a designer and an art director. So, I mean, I was a writer where, like, I joked about this the other day. Like, I think I was using, like, Quark Express.
Quark?
Remember that?
Oh, absolutely.
And it was the only way to put a headline on a page and maybe put a color behind it.
Yeah.
So that was my whole portfolio with stuff like that. But, so the internship, as you said, work placement was a big part of it. It's a pretty nerve-wracking time because there was one portfolio show that you did. I think it was possibly the ADCC student portfolio show is the one that every student in the city kind of geared towards, whereas now I think there's lots of different ones. All the creative directors came out. They're all sitting around. All the students are gossiping about the best place and, I need to show my portfolio to that person and that person. And then you leave your portfolio for the weekend or the week, and creative directors can come down and have a peek, when they want. I got a call from Brian Howlett.
I know that name.
He's a great individual. He worked at an agency at the time that was called Axsmith McIntyre Vict. And it's a W, but that's how you pronounce it. And I learned that the hard way working there. But it's now Agency 59.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah. I can't remember when they changed their name. Sorry, Brian. I run into him like once every 5 years. It's just, he's the exact same guy.
And he's like, there's my boy.
And he was like, I think you're a good writer. And that was the first time someone had complimented. Do you know what I mean? Where you're like, maybe I can have like a mediocre 2 to 3 year career in this kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
Because your confidence is at an all-time low coming out of school.
Yeah.
And I mean, this was the agency doing the Labatt, Know When to Draw the Line stuff, doing some great work for Mercedes dealership group. They had a bunch of accounts, but they let me cut my teeth on a ton of stuff that summer. That was sort of the first sort of foray into maybe I can do this. Maybe. They paired me up with a great art director there. We had it was a pretty fun summer. Yeah, I got to work on a bunch of stuff.
What do you think the best advice someone gave you as it relates, when you were young and wanting to work in the business? What's the best advice you got?
Like trying to get into the business?
Yeah.
Everyone kind of says the same thing, like don't give up, keep pushing and keep knocking on doors. And I kind of was getting sick of hearing that until I just kept, then someone finally replied and was like, actually, do you want to come in for an interview? We have a junior position we'd like to talk to you about. So I literally didn't give up there's times there at the end of your internship when you don't get hired. Some people are getting hired. Friends from your class are like, well, I got hired here. And you're like, I have no job. It's the end of August. You've got rent to pay. Luckily, I moved in with some friends, crashed on their couch, and just kept shopping my portfolio around. And then finally, actually Publicis at the time, I was able to get a position there with Pat Parisi and Duncan Bruce. Duncan's still there.
Yeah,
and he's been there forever.
It's done fabulously, well for himself and his brother.
And his brother, yeah, Bruce Brothers. But they, I remember I sent an email, and I've actually joked with this individual before, even though I'm sure he might not remember me. But you obviously know Dave Kivigato?
Yeah.
Yeah. So at the time, and still is, I think, I was like, well, why don't I just go at the best writer and start there, and I'll just start working my way down. So I remember flipping him an email saying, I think you're the funniest and best copywriter in the city. And I, obviously I tried to make everything funny was probably my problem out of the gate. And it was kind of like I don't say last ditch effort, but it was that, hey, you got to just keep going. And I just kind of shied away from sending my work to the really best people. And then I think to circle back to your question, it was like, what's the worst that they can say? Nope. Or they don't answer, like, but it's worth a shot kind of thing. I think I remember calling I was in a dark place probably, but I called the subject heading worth a shot. So clearly he opened it and he said, I'll tell you what, I think Pat and Duncan are looking for a junior writer right now. Why don't you flip them? So now I had, and this was key, this is good advice. Then I had Dave Kivagato told me to get in touch with you. So I get those emails a lot from.
So you drop a name and.
You drop a name and they're like, well, if he thinks it's okay, maybe we'll meet with this kid. So that got me an interview, and then that kind of just sort of took off from there. Wow. This looks really bad out there.
It's raining pretty heavy right now.
I'm not going to lie, I'm a little stressed out about my basement. Yeah, that's crazy. So yeah, then that's where I kind of started the career. To answer your question in a really long, kind of rambling way.
Yeah, I mean, I remember I got out of college, and there was 2 years before I landed a job, and it wasn't even a writing job. It was like
2 years.
2 years.
What'd you do?
I was a security guard.
Were you good?
I mean,
did you have to act tough a couple times?
I never, there's some interesting stories of when it was an IBM tower at York Mills and Don Mills.
See, this should be a series. Jobs I had trying to get a job in advertising.
What did you do before you got your job?
Yeah.
Because mine
when you were
was
trying to get the job.
Yeah.
What did you do? Yours was just a security guard.
I was a security guard, and it was an IBM tower at York Mills and Don Mills, and.
What do you mean? You guarded the tower?
Well, the funny part was that when I first started working there,
circles around the tower.
Yeah,
all night?
that's right. It's still there. When I first started there, it was like a full-on building. But then they vacated. I don't know if you wouldn't know this probably, but they built like a super IBM building at Vic Park, and all the IBM they vacated. Yeah, you
okay.
know, they vacated those buildings, but for insurance purposes, they still needed to have someone there.
Oh,
so it meant that I would.
You were an insurance claim.
I was. It was 13-hour shifts.
Jesus.
Alone.
Oh my God.
In a building.
No.
I mean, if there
At
was
night, was it the night shift?
It would go from 4 to
But no one else
midnight.
was out there.
No one was there.
Wow. Crazy.
And the big upside of doing something like that is that you got a lot of time.
Yeah.
So if you're working on your portfolio, you can
just sit there banging out some lines?
Not that I wasn't working on a portfolio. No.
I'll do it tomorrow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think for a lot of young people too. I mean, it is a cliche kind of thing to say, just keep at it, because watch any episode of American Idol and you're like, I don't think as long as that person tries, it's still not going to be a great for them.
And you know what? You have to get. What I try to tell people too is like, a lot of the times what I'll do is I'll give feedback to students or people looking for a job, and then they won't go do it and won't come back with it. And the ones that do that end up getting jobs.
Right.
Like 100% of the time.
Yeah.
So it's, I think maybe the issue right now is students come in, and if you're not offered a job right then and there, they move on and they just kind of go elsewhere. Whereas it's like, have you tried thinking about this? Whereas like what they don't realize is you're kind of testing them out to see what they're like to work with. Can they take feedback, take it away, think through, come back to you with better stuff. And I think right now with young students, even though you're asking me, my advice was what I was offered, but this is what I've noticed is the ones who then take that away and come back to you a week later shows you passion, shows you that they listen, and shows you that they actually cared about what you had to say. Whereas the ones who then just disappear, and you're like, but I offered you to send me some new versions of this, and they just, a lot of them just
I didn't
that didn't work. Okay,
that.
Let's go to what's the other one?
Yeah.
Kind of thing. So
I think that's true. I think it's like a mentality.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, as writers, I think you can see that over time that you get better, it's like anything. When I made a transition to directing in a studio, I was petrified.
I'm sure.
I was stressed out. I was stressed out for like 2 years.
Yeah. I remember the director just had to leave the room once, and I had to talk to the talent. And I'm like 2 years in, and I literally froze.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll try that. And everyone's staring at you. Try what, Chris? The thing you said about the pasta, maybe we could just try that again. And then thankfully the engineer just kind of took over. But
one of my first sessions was for Pizza Delight.
And
And
is that still around? I thought that was only.
no,
in
I
the
don't think
Maritimes.
so. It was good pizza though.
I thought Pizza Delight was like the poor man's Pizza Hut in my hometown. I thought we couldn't get a Pizza Hut
I
here,
can
but
still
Pizza
see
Delight showed up.
It's like an octagon logo with
Yeah,
like bars
their
across
logos
it.
were similar.
Yeah.
Yeah. Pizza
But
Delight. How'd it go?
You know what? It was a really sweaty moment.
Uh-oh.
I was. Do you know David Burney, the actor David Burney?
Rings a bell.
A very, very, very funny, talented guy.
He just sniffed you out from the minute you started talking.
honestly.
Probably.
And what I did learn about being a great director, and I was working with Terry O'Reilly, who is the best director of all time.
Yeah.
And was that you don't try too hard. And so I sat down, and it was like this dialogue between David Burney and this other actor. And I started giving them backstory. Even before they started, they started backstory. You guys, probably went to college together. You're friends. You rip on each other. And I'm kind of, feeling my way through this and trying to seem like I'm better than I am.
Yeah.
And
And we just talk more when we're nervous.
yeah. And you got this whole, got a whole banquet of people just staring at you through the glass as you yammer on.
Yeah.
And then right in the middle of it, David Burney goes, "What is this, a mini series?" And that's when that little bead of sweat starts running.
That's great. He probably sniffed you out like in the first 5 seconds.
Yeah, I mean, and in terms of writing, I feel like it's the same. There's a lot, with writing too, is that when you're young, you're really trying to try too hard almost.
Yeah. I actually
Nope.
wish that was more of a problem, is people trying too hard.
That's right. Yeah,
But
it'll
yeah,
come to me.
it's
Don't worry.
it's like it sounds cliche. It's like free throws. It's like you have to keep doing it. You have to keep doing it. And I mean, I remember when I started, there were stories of like, write 300 lines and don't come back to my office until you have 300 lines. But I think it probably worked for people, because the more you write, the better you get. So
a great story that one of my mentors, Tom Gowdy, told me was that, he got his first job at an agency, and he had to write a radio script or something.
Yeah.
And he writes the radio script, and he takes it to the creative guy and the senior, and he looks at it, reads it, and he takes a pen and he right across it, gives
Right.
it back to him.
Right. And he's like, "Is that a check mark?" Or?
Yeah, yeah, that's right. So he's like, okay, fine. Goes back,
Yeah.
writes more, comes back.
Yeah.
Creative director takes his pen, crosses it out, gives it back to him. On the third one, he said, don't cross it out. I think it's a good idea. And he said, great, you're now ready to defend your work.
Right.
So let's talk about it.
Right.
Which doesn't even seem like a real story. But
No, I like that though.
But that is very true, And
Yeah.
one of my misconceptions I had getting into business was I thought the most creative people would be the most successful.
Right.
And I learned pretty quickly that you had to be able to sell work if
Yeah.
you were going to be successful.
Yes.
And oftentimes, the guys who are really good at selling weren't as good as some of the creative people that I saw. Their ideas weren't as strong as them, but they got their work through.
Yeah, you have to, the amount of internal presentations you have to go through before you even get to a client, those just need to be treated as like rehearsals for the client, because sometimes those are worse than the client presentation. They're harder. They're like, you've got people who are, not in a creative department telling you what's creative and what isn't. You need to defend to them. Your initial reaction is to get mad at everybody who doesn't like it. But you have to listen to everybody. So it's almost training for that client presentation. Because if you can walk into a client presentation, and you're right, 50%, maybe more, is the sell. Because one of the misconceptions I had was that once you had a great idea, we're good. I was like, I thought selling it was a technicality.
Yeah.
But it's...
Isn't it obvious?
But it's amazing.
Yeah.
Like, why... I don't know why we're having a meeting about the meeting to sell it. I remember thinking that in an internship, like, why everyone likes it though. And it's great. It's amazing. And they're like, no, we got to sell this to the client though. And I was like, what are you talking? Why wouldn't they just love it? We all love it. So
Yeah.
that was an eye opener. That probably seems a bit idiotic looking back on it now, but I didn't realize how much of the sell had to go into it. Pre-sell too. Some clients you need to get on the phone with before, chat about it. See where their head's at. Make sure you're not completely coming out of left field on the day, because as we all know, that happens, where you have those creative presentations where you can literally hear a pin drop, and it's so awkward, and you just are so way off base with what you're presenting them. But that presentation skill set is huge, and you're right. It can take some great presentation skills can take a mediocre idea and make it seem incredible.
Very
great
often.
Comedic timing. If like, you know, some of the best, I will say though, some of the best creatives I've ever worked with who continue to be some of the best creatives, like kill it in a room.
Yeah.
They're either funny, they're compelling, they're serious, they're energetic. You know, they project.
I don't think it should be that
Confident.
surprising either that, you know, when you're a student, you have a portfolio, and what do? Well, you sit in front of them, you kind of open the work, and they start to go through it, and and so in your mind you think, well, this is I'm presenting work.
Yeah.
But of course, some great advice, you know, I was given early on too, is just don't show them the work right away. Whoa, slow down.
Yeah.
And
set it up.
You know, I've seen really strong, strategic thinking, creative guys who, by the time they show the work, it's over. Like, it's literally, that horse is right at the trough, and now it's just like, okay, have at it. You know, that good, where it's just you almost saying no, you would just, you might seem like, well, I'd be stupid if I said no now, right?
It's all about that. The idea statement helps with that.
Yeah.
I find, you know, the setup paragraph, every agency does it, where it's a bit of a head nod, where you get their heads nodding before you show them the work. They're like, yeah, well, of course.
Yeah.
You know, so why don't we just show them why? Right?
Yeah.
Seems smart. And then you show the work, and it's like, well, yeah, obviously, this is perfect. I'd like to say that every presentation goes like that, but it doesn't. But yeah, it's that pre-sales and big part of it.
Yeah, so many marketing people too. I mean, you occupy such a small percentage of what they're working on.
Yeah.
You know, often you walk in and think, well, you know, we talked about this a couple of weeks ago, right? I mean, you know what we're doing right now. So,
Yeah.
you know, I'll just, you know why you're here, so here it is.
Yeah.
And it's like, yeah, but I just had a 6-hour meeting on merchandising or something.
Yeah, we had a client tell us once, like, a great lesson was, I want you to know that my time with the agency is 10% of my day. Yeah, I've got a sales meeting this afternoon. Our numbers are off. You know, there's a supply chain issue. You know, I'm flying to wherever tomorrow to deal with this. Okay, show me the work. They haven't been thinking about the work for 2 weeks like you. Or in today's day and age, in 3 days like you. But knowing a little bit about what their day is like is a huge part of it.
Yeah. I remember Randy Diplock telling me, he's like, don't kid yourself.
Was he a director?
He did. He moved into directing.
Okay. Yeah.
But before that, a really great writer worked with Jamie Way at the time at Shy Day, and you know, he was like, "Hey, you know, don't kid yourself. You're a salesman, right? You have all these people who have this idea that you're know, a creative guy in a room, you know, sitting around, you know, playing pool and kind of spitballing ideas." And he's like, "But at the end of the day, you're here to sell something, and you better think about that if you're going to be successful."
I'll tell you what, the year that I told you I had a little fun in Halifax before coming to Humber, I worked at Future Shop. Our buddy was like the manager. So even the 2 guys I lived with in Halifax, it was just a continuation of university, but instead of going to class, we were going to work. Didn't know a thing about anything, but it was like it's all commission based. Future Shop's obviously no longer, but I had to learn how to sell stuff that I really at times knew nothing about, so I'd have to learn about it, think about how to explain it to them in a way that would be beneficial to them and make sense to them. And you know, you'd get like an 80-year-old grandmother coming in needing a new TV, and you get like a 25-year-old wanting the latest technology. So in essence, it's hard to just say, go get a sales job first, but you're right. In essence, you are a salesman. And the skill set even there of being okay to walk up to someone and say, I'm going to sell you this, was huge. Little did I know later to have to sit down. Selling your work to your creative director alone. Like if you come in a little timid and not organized, it's over before it starts. Like you don't have time for that.
Yeah, no one has time for that.
Yeah, we preach that a lot at our office. Just like, this is our time for you. This is your time to get your ideas made. You know, so be organized, have it on the wall or have it on the table, however you want to do it, and let's just get down to business. But yeah, you gotta sell.
Yeah, it's not just about coming up with ideas. The amount of times I've had people come to my door and sort of say, hey, Steve, you know, like I had a really great idea, and it's like 2 guys, and it would be like, I was like, did you write it? And then the next day, you know, I had another idea. It's like, did you write it down, though? Also, I remember Aubrey Singer. I don't know if you know who Aubrey Singer was.
That rings a bell. I think he may have been involved with Duncan Bruce back in the day.
That's right. They were partners at Shy Day.
Yeah, and I think he went on to be a director.
Yeah.
Yeah. if I remember correctly, that guy could write scripts pretty freaking quickly.
He was great. He was very good at his job.
Because I wasn't sure.
Yeah,
I don't
it's a family show.
Yeah. But yeah, what about Aubrey?
Aubrey, I remember presenting to him, going to him with my work and kind of saying, what's this? And I do an okay job at like setting up what the idea was, and it was written on a script and stuff. And then, but when I got to the announcer copy, I'd be like, and in there it'll say something, it'll say, the car has this, this, and this. And he goes, yeah, blah, blah, blah. And he goes, but what do they say? Right? Like, it's not done yet, right? Yeah. Plus, Terry would always say this to me all the time.
Blah, blah.
This is what clients hear. Blah, 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 bullshit, my part. Bullshit.
2.8%.
Right? That's
financing.
right. Like, they need to know what it says.
Yeah, don't do an 80% script. You got to finish it off. What's the line at the end? Don't know yet.
Don't know yet. But it's going to be great. Yeah.
Just working on that right now.
That's great. I want to talk to you about, like, what's going on now with you and what are you excited about? I know that, you won it too at Cannes recently.
Yeah, LG2 had a good year in Cannes. What's going on with me right now? We're, for the last 5 years, actually this September, we're 5 years old at LG2 Toronto, which is something we're super excited and proud about. My lifelong creative partner, Nelli Kim, and I decided to start the LG2 Toronto office 5 years ago. At the time, LG2 obviously was pretty well known for their work, but they'd been in Montreal for 20 years. Also have an office in Quebec City. They just wanted to, independent agency, one of the last in Canada. So proud to still say that they're independent as well. And that was kind of, my background was independent. I just was always part of independent, kind of scrappy agencies. And I've seen the difference between the two, like the holding company agency and the independent one. And so we were trying to we tried to poke a lot of holes in it. Like, well, what is this? Is this just a satellite office? It's like, no, we want to finally expand nationally. Very hands off, go do what you want to do in the Toronto market, and we're here to support you type thing. So we decided to sort of take the leap. And after, a long time at John Street, which is where I met Nelli, we decided to open up LG2 Toronto, which was, that first day was pretty crazy. I remember walking in and we were in this huge office space, which was already like, hey, fill it, and I was like, it's too quiet. So I brought my record player in and some speakers, which is still at the office to this day, just to have some music on in the background. And I remember we were doing like our first presentation or pitch, like we didn't even have a client. And there was like workers still putting up drywall like in the corner. And I was thinking, if we didn't do it, it's just like, you'd always wonder kind of what if. And
so how'd that come about?
Going to LG2?
Yeah, like how'd that opportunity come up?
They reached out to us, yeah. The great Luc Dussault and Marc Fortin, they were the creative directors of Montreal and Quebec City, came to Toronto and asked us to chat. And explained to us what the plans were, and then we slowly started meeting some of the partners in the company, and they explained, their intentions and what they wanted to do. And honestly, they were just such a good group of people that we couldn't find anything like I said, trying to poke holes in it. And the intention was great, and it's been like that ever since. Very supportive. It's very family kind of vibe. We talk all the time. How about this? Exchange ideas, things like that. But that's how it came about. And then we brought on Jeremy Gayton as our third partner. So he's the president of LG2 Toronto, and he'd spent a long time at Taxi. So he actually saw Taxi through the independent days as well. And then obviously the WPP purchase of Taxi, and we went through the same thing at John Street. So we had a lot of like war stories together about, the days that we really liked in advertising, where he had opened up Taxi 2 back in the day, and he said he recalled that being some of his fondest memories. Some of his fondest memories in advertising were then starting from scratch, sort of. But
did John Street prepare you for that kind of position? Like it's it seems like a big move into being part of a creative team and doing really good work, and then being approached. But you're talking about running a business now.
Yeah. That's a really good point. We were probably prepared for we were prepared for the creative director side. We were creative directors at John Street at the time. Obviously, Angus and Steve had started John Street back in the day with their partners, and sort of moved into more of a senior executive role and let us sort of take over the department a little bit. So we were prepared in that sense for the different personalities. I think we had 6 teams. There was a great run there where there was some really talented creatives that we had in the department. Funny enough, we were on the 4th floor and they were on the 1st floor. So just geographically speaking, the day-to-day grind of managing people just was a part of our day at that agency. So I also mean managing personalities, conflicts, things like that. So there was a little bit of training for that, but nothing like just going and doing it yourself. I wish, creating was all that you did as a creative director. But as a manager, like running a business, I've learned like so much. I've learned a ton in the last, 3-4 years.
How scary was it to walk into Steve and Angus's office and say, "Hey, I know we're doing really well now, but..."
They were disappointed for sure. And we were, of course, nervous to tell them. A year prior, I think 6 months prior to that is when they'd sold to WPP. So, I think that their succession strategy maybe, is something that they'd planned out. But anytime you need to go tell someone you're leaving, it's no fun, especially when you've been at a place for a long time. What I was going to joke about was they were, I think they were still kind of in a pretty good headspace given what had occurred to them prior to that. But yeah, no, they weren't happy. That's for sure. But Steve's basically running Miami Ad School now, doing some great stuff. So I think he left, we went to his going away. I think he left about a year ago or so. And so I think the only ones remaining now are Angus and Arthur. That was a little bit of a...
What do you think
you try to rehearse what you're going to say and then you just say it. But at the end of the day, it's exactly what they did. When they started John Street, they all had to go leave where they were at. I think it was Amorati at the time. I think that was actually like the beginning of the end for Amorati, if I remember correctly, but that was a little before my time. But never fun. Even when we've had people who've moved on as well, and just you look in their eyes and you just empathize, going, "Oh my God, they're so nervous." They're bad. I was like, I know they're about to quit, but I feel so bad. They're so nervous.
It's funny how when someone walks into a room, even before they say anything,
bad news. There's a vibe.
It's coming.
It's coming.
Yeah.
It's usually, "Can we talk?"
Yeah.
Yeah.
Never said that to me ever before.
Yeah.
Could we talk?
Yeah. One of the first rules or the learnings in managing an agency is get ahead of the "can we talk?" Yeah. So that was something that is, don't just let stuff fester. For all you know, something's just festering in someone's mind, and you gotta get ahead of it. Always communicate. How you doing? What's new? Anything on your mind? Especially these days. There's a lot of stuff on people's minds, whereas I think back in the day, people maybe just kept it in a little more.
I was gonna, because to be totally honest, I remember having a conversation with you at one of the galas for NAC, where we talked about millennials and what it's like to manage them now, and you had some really pretty interesting insights on how different it is and how different people are, because you came up in a different era. And
I definitely came up in an era where it was just it was probably a little harsher than I even realized at the time. You talk about the strike through the work when you get it. Yeah, like some of the commentary of the work I was showing early bosses was just phenomenally ignorant or rude or just, and you just kind of took it.
Oh, not gonna fly in this piece of world now.
No, and I think the famous line was, "I wish I could fly over all of this work so I could shit on it." Sorry, poo on it. And I remember thinking like, "Oh, cool, interesting. I never had a professor say that, or a teacher." But no, I think it's just, for me, the learning is just communicating more. Don't just assume that people are going to come in and put their head down and work, and not tell you or complain about things. There are issues, and people voice those issues probably more than they did. So it's not a bad thing, the communication aspect, but I have a much easier time, and I know Nelli and I have a much easier time dealing with that when the individual is definitely trying and bringing it giving it their all, throughout it. And your job is to make sure that you're not, burning them out. You're not giving them too much work. I think earlier on the assumption was everyone's fine unless they say something, but
now you're checking in.
Oh yeah. Yeah. You got to be proactive. Don't be reactive or else it's can we talk?
Can we talk?
Yeah. Do you have 10 minutes? I'm like, ooh, that sounds like resignation time. Because if it was a creative internal, it'd maybe half an hour minimum. Do you have 10 minutes? 5 is just a check-in. Hey, you did maybe a vacation request.
But 10 is the kiss of death.
10 is the kiss of death. Now that I think about it. Oh, man, that just freaked me out. I got to check and see if I have any 10-minute meetings scheduled today.
You're a partner at this firm, and, I think there's a lot of creative people who aren't comfortable going after new business and putting on that hat of really going in and selling. How much of your job now is getting new clients? Is that part of your responsibility?
Yeah, 100%. Especially early on, right? So, we're getting upwards 50 people now at the office. Like I said, it'll be 5 years in September. But at the end of the day, we're working partners, as we like to say, not just sort of swoop in, pitch, and then swoop out. Which is the case, obviously. It has been over the years at some places. And we're heavily involved in every aspect, which is you hit that point where you're trying to bring up and train individuals so you don't have to do every single thing throughout the day because you just don't have the time. I don't have the time, and Nelli doesn't have the time. Jeremy doesn't have the time. Our VP of strategy, Keith Barry, he just doesn't have the time to be doing everything. But when it comes down to like a pitch, and they say we want to see the people we'll be seeing every day, we have to be like, no, really, it's us. We're the partners here, and we're not going anywhere. So whether that's everything from, we had a client that was doing something on the island, a sports apparel client, and Jeremy's over there hammering in signs. He's like the agency president. We're soaking wet. I was on a boat over to the island, just in a raincoat getting dumped on, and we're trying to set up this electronic digital experience on the runway at Porter Airlines because that's where part of the race went. And that to me is the perfect example of being involved in everything. We even negotiated a media buy inside of a gentleman's apartment, and Nelli's father did it in Korean for us because he's Korean, and the individual who owned the building was Korean, and so Nelli was like, "I'll take it from here," kind of thing. And so, I mean, if that's not an example of the heavily involved partner thing, that in my mind, that's the story I always tell. But definitely a part of the pitches and the new business and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, a gentleman like Jeremy or a Keith will sort of lead the beginning of that, and we're brought in when we're needed.
There's a lot of fun. I know, I'd sent you some questions that I was going to ask you,
right.
and I always like to ask this one question, which is, what's the most ridiculous thing that's ever happened to you in advertising?
There's so many I could tell. I'm trying to think of how not to get in trouble.
I had a client who, in a record situation, said, I can't hear the E in home. Which kind of stopped us dead in our tracks. We didn't quite know what to say. You're trying to find a diplomatic way of saying, no one does.
Yeah, I mean, I'll steal a story. I'll steal a story that it was, I think it was one of the first clients John Street had, where they were holding the poster up, and I believe the client, I won't name them, but sort of sat back and took their glasses off. And it's like, my only problem is when I take my glasses off, I can't see the logo. Everything's just too small. I can't read it. And I think there was a good 10-second, 15-second pause of silence where everyone wanted to say, well, don't take your glasses off. That was one that I heard that I was just like, that's hysterical. But for me, there are so many. The directors and the shoot stories and things like that. But one was more of a comment. We were on our third round presenting to, all I'll say is a chicken client, and we just kept trying to be funny. We just kept writing comedy scripts, and I think it was our third round presenting, and it's just silence, just straight faces, and I'm doing the most ridiculous stuff, to act out the script and get it sold, and they just looked down and they stared straight ahead and they're like, I think you guys are too funny for chicken. And I wanted to do what you just did, which is smile and laugh. And I'm like, oh, they're serious.
Yeah.
And we're like, oh. And then we were no longer working on the business after that. Yeah. Things got really serious on that.
Chicken serious.
Things got really serious.
This whole time I was thinking chicken was kind of a low involvement category. And now I'm thinking, there's more to it.
Yeah. Well, that's the whole point of making it funny. But comedy was, not welcome in that presentation room. We tried 3 times, but that brand sort of took a turn towards the serious actually after that. And they stuck with that for a bit. Yeah.
Chris Hirsch.
Yeah.
Thanks for coming out and being part of the first NAC podcast.
Inaugural. God, I hope this isn't the last one.
It was a good time.
Or else it didn't work.
Thanks a lot. This episode has been brought to you by the National Advertising Challenge, North America's only brief-based challenge that sends winners to Cannes, France. Sign up for updates on all our competitions at thenationaladvertisingchallenge.com, and please follow us on our social channels